Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first to Spartan Grown.
Thank you, Jack. I am Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com, and I can help you with all of your cannabis growing or lighting questions.
Happy to have you back. And next up, we've got Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone. Today I guess we'll be talking about a research report, at least partly, that was looking at feral hemp in the United States, and also some predictions about, what the future might hold for how it grows and how it can spread and what that tells us about cannabis in general. So stay tuned for that.
Interesting stuff for sure. I always love a good science talk. It's been a little while. We've been doing some Q&A and specific other topics, and it's always nice to get into some of the white paper research type things. But before we do, I want to go ahead and introduce Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everybody? I'm no other grow on Instagram. You can find me there. It's too easy my name. Happy to be here.
We are all happy to have you back. And last and certainly not least, we've got the American one.
Jack, as always, thanks for hosting. Good to see everyone on the panel and everyone in chat. I am the American One on YouTube and the American One underscore with underscore Keens over on the IG. Most of you know where to find me. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Great to have you all. I always enjoy coming here each week for a couple hours and talking grow, and it's fun when we have some science to discuss. And with no further ado, I guess Matthew has the article available to him that we will be going over this evening. So he's going to kind of take over and go ahead and maybe share his screen and walk us through a little bit of this paper, and then we'll start talking about some of the cool science here, starting with this research article.
Yeah, so basically, the title is, for those who aren't watching, utilizing digitized occurrence records of Midwestern feral cannabis sativa to develop ecological niche models. So what they're referring to is essentially where can these feral populations grow based on information that we have of where we found it. So they're specifically looked at what they would call Midwest. And I guess you guys are going to have to let me know. As a Californian, I don't think I get a right to tell people where, the Midwest is and isn't. But it looks like we have here um, Missouri, Kansas, Illinois, which I was in recently last weekend. Just missed the storm barrel and another storm that came afterwards. Michigan, of course, Indiana, and yeah, so the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota. So this diagram here shows data where they had those occurrences, and this is not just cultivated, but like feral populations. And here we have, so this is basically a ecological model, like an environmental model. So based on what we know about like other research that shows cannabis physiology and its ecology, maximum and minimum temperature thresholds and things like this, um, its origin zones and elsewise, you can use that information to get an idea, plus geographic knowledge of like where these feral populations that aren't cultivated are doing better. That can give you a bit of a model of what you can expect. And so that's what this diagram here is about. So this is habitat suitability. So the closer it is to like a dark red color, the less habitable it is, this area. And for my budworm population video that's going to come out at some point, I did actually take some of this data and fused it with some geographic information, and actually have that. I'll put that at the end here if you're interested to see how these lines match up with like the state lines and things like that, because they actually don't have that in this research report. If we go through it, they don't really have anything like that. But it was easy enough to kind of to grok that. But here you can see, and they say this in the text, that places that are the most habitable are the ones that are closer to this like dark blue, almost black color. Um, and you may notice that these look like the ridges that you would see for like a ravine. or river or some kind of waterway like that, which is not super unsurprising. Obviously, water helps things grow. But what's interesting is that like this area here, um, so like was that like North Dakota, South Dakota? Yeah. You can barely see the writing if you're watching this. You can barely see the states, but they don't really articulate very well. This is still like Great Plains area. So I'm kind of surprised. Maybe it's just a sampling bias, but you can see that here where like the Great Lakes are on the upper right, where they trail into and trail out to with the waterways, and that seems to be where it's most habitable.
I'm surprised if you scroll back just for a second
But
to
yeah,
see both Ohio and Michigan have so little area that's considered habitable. In terms of at least what I'm seeing a lot of red, very little
yes,
blue,
exactly.
almost no green in Ohio, and then Michigan's got a tiny bit. But I know both of those places, and this is more for the sustainability of cannabis sativa. But I think they're talking about feral and wild hemp, where I think what I'm just thinking of is cultivated cannabis. But it is interesting to see.
Well, I mean, like the origin zone, for those who aren't familiar, the best example we have of this, at least, is basically the Tibetan Plateau, which is a polar arid desert. And it's expanded out before human civilization. It expanded out the Caspian Steppe and other areas, what we would call East Asia now, South Asia too. So ostensibly, they can do very well in a lot of different ecological ranges. So I agree with you. So it's sort of interesting. And they do talk about the limitations. Like any good research, they do talk about limitations and scope and that kind of a thing, which we can talk about later, I suppose.
Unrelated, I will
Um,
say, as an Ohioan, I'm happy to see it included in the Midwest because I always said I'm from the Midwest. I got that Midwest love, but they're like, you're on East Coast time, dude. Like Ohio's an East Coast state. I'm like,
oh,
but I've always heard it was
So is
Midwest, so
Michigan.
it's
You're okay.
yeah.
I'm not as surprised as I thought until I considered that this is probably considering, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is considering whether it's habitable as far as if it grew on its own with no help from man, would it do well or not do well?
essentially.
That makes sense to me because even when you're cultivating it, it's difficult to get something to finish outside. This is outside. This isn't like indoor cultivation. This is just like a plant doing its thing outside.
Yeah,
I mean,
this is
even
like
with
this.
help, it's hard
These
to get
are
a crop off. So it doesn't surprise me. It
as
surprises me
Spartans.
that the UP is it's between 75 and 100% habitat suitability, which surprises the absolute crap out of me, which is it's so cold up there. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan. See how it's blue? Half of the UP is blue.
That little stretch above the glove that's not attached to the glove. There's
Yeah,
It's
water
that's
in
attached
right.
by
that.
the Mackinac Bridge. It's attached.
Yeah,
It
Matthew
is
just highlighted
attached.
it,
Yeah, there we go.
and
Right here.
it is attached by a bridge. That's interesting. I actually was not aware of that. My ignorance of geography knows no
And
bounds.
for our foreigners, this is like Ohio area right
Yep.
here. Um, and actually, since we're here, I think that my Zoom foo is good enough that I can maybe
Layover.
switch to a different here. Let's see, new share. So here's the picture I was talking about. I'll switch back. But this I think shows a little bit better.
Oh, nice.
This map on the overlay is it's from a topographical map. Like they have three different grades of like detail and complexity. This is the most, and this isn't like perfectly overlaid, right? But you can kind of see I did a pretty good job for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see that the yeah, so I also have it negative. So now blue is bad, red closer to like white color is good. So you can see here that the rivers, and that's why I had that sort of loaded in my phrase here, that like the rivers seem to be the point. So it makes sense that if we're talking about places where Spartan, where do you think? Where do you think is 42 degrees latitude roundabout? Is that thing that you would know off the top of your
No,
head?
that's not something I know off the top of my head. No.
Yeah, me neither. But so basically like
It's going to be
yeah,
a little
we're
north of Detroit though, still, and you can see Detroit on the map. So I
okay.
think it's
That's very
north of
helpful
that.
actually. Yeah, so like this line here that I'm can you see my mouse? I forget.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you can. So like this here, so like anything past here, it gets pretty cold. And So I feel like it makes sense that like without any help from other people, these are like populations that eke out an existence. They're not and so we're talking about like, do they do really well or do they do like okay? And not very habitable doesn't mean that they don't exist at all. But it does mean that it's just less. It seems like it's less beneficial, less helpful, less suitable, which is the word that they used. So I'll go back now.
Yeah, I just find it curious that around all the water sources, it seems like that's where it does well, but I don't understand up in the UP what's so special. It's probably because there's no people there.
It could, I mean, it could be that, like, yeah, because that's Spartans brings up a great point, like a founder effect, right?
Also, there's lots of like microclimates around water, and I think that, like he's saying, there's like basically untouched like forest almost, and then there's water that makes probably during a lot of the season high humidity. Like I'm by the ocean, and we get kind of like May gray, June gloom situation. But if I drive 5 minutes east, it's sunny on the same like city. It's so regional to the microclimate to the being on the coast or near water can really impact the amount of direct sunlight and in some cases, that can benefit, but it can also, if you're getting less sunlight, that would make you think that it's not going to be as likely to grow very well. But I'm thinking maybe just a more moderate season throughout the whole year where Michigan gets super fucking hot in the summer and humid, and then it gets really cold. Uh, Maybe they don't get as hot during the summertime, and that potentially helps. But we can keep moving on with the paper here.
I want to give opportunity for other people to give their points there. That's actually a really natural break, I think. So the next part is going to be about like predictive models. So like if things get from like 2021 to 2024, things stay normal, whatever that means. Negligible change, terrible. They use the word terrible here, and meltdown. And that's 2061 to 2080 there. But yeah, anyone else have ideas about like feral hemp survivability and perhaps also, for example, my father's from Kentucky. I know Kentucky is one of the states that had a lot of hemp growing, and it'd be cool to see that come back, in my opinion.
It was highly cultivated in Kentucky. That's also part of it. I think the history being so rich there, being cultivated for so long for many different purposes, is part of the reason that the feral stuff pops up. You see it in Oklahoma as well. Aaron the grower had a feral hemp project he was working with. And I've also seen and known some feral hemp varieties to be very drought resistant and drought tolerant, as well as cold resistant and like even frost tolerant. In fact, Miss Nudie Grows brought home some bag seed from Mexico and she grew them out in Canada and they survived multiple snows before they died. So even a non-acclimated cannabis plant in a snowy area was able to survive. It took multiple snows for it to kill. And again, that was cultivated and not wild. But it goes to show that I think that there's some resilience within the gene pool that maybe doesn't always get tapped into until you put it into that extreme circumstance. And the strongest survive in that case. Natural selection happens, and the ones that are surviving in the UP end up, procreating, and then they have these cold resistant feral hemp varieties there, or faster finishing, or whatever it is that it adapted.
I feel similarly. There's a nice section here where the researchers talk about exactly this point. Just wanted to try to see if I can get to it. But they essentially said they had a nice paragraph that showed. I'll probably find it somewhere else, but basically that if you find the research, I can send it to anyone who's interested. But they said that exactly what Jack said, that a lot of landrace and feral populations do have drought tolerance. Have been kind of like verified and confirmed to show these traits at a greater level. And of course, as you would expect, regional sort of resistances to the environmental stressors and that kind of a thing. So it was really cool because they referenced it, and so if people are interested in like breeding or looking at some of the populations that they looked at, um, I think that's like really helpful, and it's nice that we can have a record of that.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's been like 100 years that it was on its own, just if it's feral. So yeah, the strongest survive.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
how long do we think that is?
I mean,
exactly from Prohibition.
almost
Like,
100
yeah,
years,
Almost
they
1930s.
were,
exactly 100 years, right?
they were definitely growing hemp before 1920.
Yeah, long, long before, and for
Yeah,
many different
so
reasons, like George Washington and fucking the
on
guy who
American soil, yeah.
the other
So,
one
and
who was into the printing press shit. I can't think of his name right now. Flew the kite.
Gutenberg,
Flew the
I know,
kite.
Jefferson,
Jeff
Franklin.
Franklin.
Franklin,
Yeah,
yeah,
Franklin.
Franklin
He
Jefferson.
would tax his farmers if they didn't grow hemp because it was such an important thing back then. He would literally
And
like charge them if they didn't.
they were also cultivating medical marijuana in Michigan in the early 1900s.
Yeah, like all the Eli Lilly stuff was like
Yeah, yeah.
pharmaceutical tinctures up until the 1930s.
And they had cannabis americana in particular, which they were actually breeding to try and get what is it, a dose like that was consistently dosed.
More desirable effect that wouldn't have some of the downsides. They would call it like
Yeah,
cannabis poisoning, and they would like have you drink coffee. If you had like too much cannabis, it was like known to be too sedating. The cure for cannabis poisoning back then was drinking a cup of coffee, which I think is funny.
I'm
Did you say
sorry to
42nd parallel
derail.
earlier? Because I
I
looked that
did
up.
say, I did say.
So that's the almost damn near the bottom of Michigan. I just pulled up a latitude longitude map, and that's like St. Joseph, Centerville, Marshall, Hillsdale, Adrian, Monroe, Ann Arbor is north of that. Detroit is north of that. Kalamazoo is north of that. Paw Paw is north of that. So most of Michigan is north of that line where it is typically a little bit too cold. So seeing so much of it in that red zone kind of made a little bit of sense. But then the UP is still a little bit of a conundrum for me. But talking about the evolution of where it
Stood out
came
to me
from,
like crazy. I'm like, what the
Yeah,
heck
I
is
think
going on in the UP?
it must be I mean like what's the geography over there? Is it not because of all the lakes? I imagine it's
Lake effect.
lush.
No,
Yeah,
there's
does it
actually
get
it's mountainous. It's really where the only mountains are in the in not
Ah, but
United
that's
States
where the
in
water
Michigan.
would concentrate, would not, and then flow into the lakes.
Spartan? Does the
Sure.
lakes get warm?
We
Does the
have
water
we
get
have
warm in the lake?
natural artisan lakes, artisan streams that are the water just bubbles up out of the ground sometimes too.
Ah,
Oh
okay.
my. Okay. Yeah,
Um,
Yeah,
I
that's
wonder about the basin. Like the water access might be better.
like the whole of Michigan, like Michigan, the Great Lakes were kind of before the Great Lakes was a big the sea was there. There was an
Right.
ancient yeah, and so uh when the Great Lakes were carved out, they kind of formed above an ancient seabed. And a lot of the Great Lakes, I think it's on Lake Michigan side, they delve underneath that and they've got these giant salt mines. They're they're mining this ancient salt
same
that
with
is
Lake Erie. And the other
yeah,
thing
that
is,
came
like, if you look at Michigan south of the lake or anything like Ohio, it's all flat because the glaciers that scraped it, like you said, it when you went back to the topographical map that you were showing earlier of this section, Ohio is pretty much all blue or white because it literally had glaciers scrape all the way across it and then just melt into what is now Lake Erie. And it eventually stopped, and that's where I think the UP is where the glaciers probably cut off in Michigan because there's a huge mountain range looking at the topographical map of Michigan over there. So it's
well,
interesting.
and the UP is special just in the minerals that it's made out of because it was formed by this gigantic ancient volcanic eruption. And so like you go up to the northern lake shores on the northern UP and you get black beaches because it's like this volcanic rock basically.
Well, and
And
that helps.
yeah, you got a lot of
Oh
people up
yeah.
there that are looking sluice, where there's sluices and trying to find gold and all kinds of minerals. Copper, there's a huge copper mine up there. So there's a lot of natural minerals up in that area. So maybe that has a lot to do with it too.
It's like Hawaii
Apparently
is so
so.
fertile because it was formed on volcanic soils and volcanic eruptions created the lands, and those tend to produce very, very rich, healthy soil eventually once it stops, having all the volcanic eruptions and things like that. It forms the land masses and things build and grow on top of that. So it's amazing the ecological differences from the UP versus Michigan. Although they're the same state, I mean, it's just basically in the border and legally. In nature, you would categorize those as almost two completely different areas if we didn't have the United States laid out how it was. The UP I wouldn't consider them even like it's Michigan is more like Ohio than it is like the UP for the rest of it, if you look at
Well,
the
just so you
graph.
guys know that that map that I showed earlier, which once this is recorded, people will just be able to click to. They have totally, just as you said, Jack, the Upper Peninsula, the tops of the fingers in the mitt, so to speak. That section is 5.2.1, which is a has an ecological name associated with it, which I could find for people if they're interested. And then in the middle, where like the inseam of your thumb would be, that's 8.2.2, and it kind of follows the curve of the thumb. And then the rest of the hand, so to speak, is 8.1.6. So these are very different environments, especially 5 from 8. So I think you're right on the money. And what else? And so yeah, so the upper part of Michigan is very much more like, as I'm looking at this map myself, um, I guess I could just send it here. That's this one, right? Yeah.
We're educating ourselves
Yeah.
about the great state of Michigan. Everybody should go
This is a
visit there, see how
go.
beautiful it
Yeah.
is.
Michiganja.
Smoke some of that
Yeah.
good Michiganja for sure. Plenty of
Michigan. I love
Ohioans
it.
already having do.
So you can so, yeah, so for those of you who are just, just totally arcana to you, what is this American statehood? So like here we go. Here's Ohio for those people. So as you can see here, Michigan, the top part is this section is similar to, you know, right next to Lake Superior,
Yeah.
Canada area, that kind of stuff. Way different than these two, this section here.
But it's
Um,
crazy to me that the eastern side of the peninsula and the upper peninsula is just like all gravy looking for this.
I agree. It is fascinating. Um, so you heard it here first, guys. You want saline stress resistance? You go to Michigan.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. I mean, especially in places where you don't have a lot of options. Not because you can use salty nutrients or whatever, but because some places are having trouble with sailing,
Yeah.
and are next to the coast, so it'd be kind of nice. But here I'll go through this pretty quickly. So this is a similar sort of thing. This is predicted range change cannabis in the Midwestern United States, and these are through different time zones and different expectations of climate change. So one thing that so and just so you know the color code, the closer it is to like bright sunny yellow, the more that you're going to see range loss in that area, which is how I interpreted this to mean. I had a little bit of trouble when I was reading this, but so as it moves to be orangish and reddish, the areas are likely to remain occupied. Places that are purplish to sort of dark violet are going to remain unoccupied, and places that are blue are going to gain. Now, is a little bit counterintuitive, but I think what they're trying to say is that they're trying to mark places where of change, right? So either places where the plus gets bigger or the minus gets bigger. That's kind of and closer to that. And so things that are closer to the middle are going to be like more or less the same. Does that make sense?
Babe,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
that is
we're doing this
confusing.
whole thing right here.
it is confusing, right? Like I agree. I'm willing to say that to me it didn't make very much sense. But so you can see here, so remain mostly unoccupied. We have a hot mic.
Got it.
So yeah, so you can see like again, like sort of like Great Plains area. Even if things get a little bit gnarly or really gnarly, as they said here. Um,
Yeah, I would really love to see their definitions of each of these because they use some great words.
yes, they did. We could probably go. Well, there's this whole
Meltdown
section on models
specifically.
and their limitations.
So I'm assuming that they're all meaning different degrees of getting warmer.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think that when they say meltdown, they don't mean like extreme cold, because that would also be pretty serious. Well, I was
Yeah,
gonna
I
say
mean,
too,
I would think a
like,
meltdown could be a nuclear winter though, and that would be bad.
well, to your point about the history of like Michigan, like a good part of the North American continent, like down really very far down actually, even past like midway through, like the USA was like all glaciation. Like the glaciation maximum was like pretty far down from the poles of the Earth, and so like I think all of Michigan or at least for different times of like the last 25,000 years or so, there was like receding glaciation and like increasing. And so like that
Yeah.
probably had significant effects on supposedly it was not very fun. Lots of wind. Because the water was all stored up in the ice, it was like things were like very arid. The world was a lot more arid than it was than it has been
It's
getting
still
in
brutal if you
existence.
go there in the winter, Matthew. I've got family who live right on the lake in Ohio,
Oh
and there's like a
yeah?
10-foot ice wall as the waves crash into the shore.
Oh
The ice just
geez.
builds and builds and builds, and then you get these freezing mists that come flying off of it. You're getting -15 outside temp, -50 wind chill. It
Oh,
is
like a
brutal.
rime? Like an ice
But those are
rime that
becoming
like
less and
freezes
less.
things in air.
Those are becoming less and less common, though. We're not been getting that cold lately, honestly.
To
Yeah,
be
the
honest
winters
though,
are
it sounds
weird.
plausible then. Yeah, like it used to be even worse than that. Jeez.
Dude, there's been some, yeah, there's some gnarly stuff.
So other
Water
It's funny
that's
because
like,
places,
sometimes you get a late winter. Like you think it's going to be mild, and then it ends up happening in like January to March, not like November to December.
people don't realize with the Great Lakes, yeah, they're lakes, but they move like oceans. Like they got these big ass waves that continually lap the shore. And when you have frozen ice that is pounding onto the shore every wave, man, it's crazy what that ice flow can do.
It looks so wild, dude. It's like honestly, it looks like some movie or some shit. It's like some barren wasteland as it's happening. Like you watch it continue, and then like it gets thick enough, people can drive their fucking cars across it, late enough in the winter. But it's fascinating to watch how sort of extreme the conditions can get. And yeah, the lakes. I will say, I live next to the ocean. I walk there fucking every single day, and I look out at the lake, Lake Erie, which is one of the smallest Great Lakes, and you could see more water, like north to south or east to west, whatever it is, than you can when you look at the ocean out here in Southern California because we're in little bays. Like I can see land. Like if I look out like maybe a quarter mile, half mile, it kind of peaks out. At the lake, I look left, I look right. There's water everywhere. Like it's straight down. And you look across, you can't see shit on the other side. So the Great Lakes really look like an ocean. Like if people are used to going to like a lake, which is really like a pond or something that they can like tote around on their boat for like, maybe 10 seconds before you have to turn because you hit the end of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
lake.
yeah.
It's nothing like a Great Lake. Like all
This
these
is like
little,
you get in your boat, you can go miles and you can
not
look
even
around
turn.
you and not see land anywhere.
Right. Right. And you can like hit, 70 on a jet ski on a flat day, just like ripping across the water and like there's no one around. Like it's a different experience than being on a smaller body of water. There's like the one state it's like land of 1,000 lakes or something, but they're much, much smaller than any other Great Lakes. So no
I mean,
shots at
like
them yet.
Jack, like there's a place near us, right to the transverse ridge. We've got the Salton Sea, and that place gets called a sea, but it's like what, not even a tenth, I think, of the size of any of the Great Lakes.
Well, and it's funny, it's like a,
Um,
a runoff drainage issue. It's like
yeah,
polluted
yes,
and it's got a bunch of thankfully they're like pulling lithium out of there now. So with all the batteries
thankfully,
people need, they're putting some good use
because they
to it.
dumped them all there, right? Okay.
Well, it's funny because they can pull it out of like all the runoff, which makes you wonder what is in all of the different fertilizers. They can start pulling
Yes.
lithium out of the water of
Hmm.
agricultural
Battery
runoff stuff.
terps.
It's
Got the
crazy shit.
battery acid gas. So my big takeaway, my sort of unscientific opinion is that like there was not a lot of change, I feel like. Even I mean obviously with the
Yeah,
meltdown
you're absolutely
example there
right. Yeah,
was, but
that's
like it doesn't feel very different between like these two.
no,
I
I'd
guess
be
it's
curious to
normal and
see
negligible though, but
I'd be curious to see this the same overlays, but instead of going in the positive direction of temperature, going in the same, orders of magnitude in the negative temperature. I bet you there would be a pretty drastic change, more drastic than these changes. I think the cannabis can tolerate the warmer temperatures better than the cooler temperatures.
I feel, and that was actually another thing that I was planning to do is I already took all these diagrams down. I'm gonna hope to like use them because I agree it's very difficult for me to see um the difference even between like the really high ones. So anyways, don't want to belabor that point too much. This was also an example. So if people are curious, like how does this help the cheap home grower, right? Well, I think that the biggest thing is that I've said a lot. We can't like a lot of times we don't choose where we're going to grow. or it's hard to choose where you're going to live. You kind of inherit that variable usually. So knowing this, though, you might still either if you're going to find a new place to live, you might consider, hey, if this is important to me, I might decide to grow one place or another. But if you're already in an area, it helps you understand what factors are going to be what's going to have the biggest effects. So the top 10 environmental predictors contributing to the optimal model were the mean temperature of the west quarter. They said it here. So this is maybe going to be a little bit complicated, but basically, yeah, you can just think of it as the top 10 most important. So if you're going to have, if so, of course, you're going to have lots of moisture, or more moisture means it's better usually for the cannabis plant. Kind of an obvious thing, but yeah. Here, they had different. They had definitions for all these things. I'm actually forgetting what soil field capacity was. I want to say it had to do with um, I want to say I had to do something with like the amount of plants it can like support, sustain, but I forget how they did that. I can try to find that though if we're interested. Obviously, precipitate. So this was precipitation average in month 9, and precipitation in month 1, which is January, right? So these two were big predictors. And I remember reading in the report they had said that a big reason for this, of course, is that like if you're in a place that doesn't get practically any rain, but you do at least get like 2 big soaks of rain, like it seems almost like halfway through, at the beginning and almost at the end, the tail end of the year, then that's going to really help the plants grow best. So places that are like that or have rainfall or higher rainfall in these months would probably do better, is my interpretation of that. They also talk about like the heat, but they do it in the most esoteric way. So, does somebody have something they wanted to say, or is that just the scrape of
I do
a
think
bong tool?
oh, I don't know if I made a noise or if somebody else did.
Oh,
Um,
maybe you did. Okay.
the interesting precipitation differences in month 1 versus month 9, and that being such a large predictor, but it does make sense. You have to be able to get planted and in the ground. Well, in the plant's case, you have to be able to like sprout and survive, and then late into harvest, not essentially all be mold and useless. So it's a fairly decent predictor of somebody's ability to have success, depending on where they're at, based on the natural conditions. You can obviously improve your chances with a greenhouse or something.
Yeah, and so like here, like getting a lot of heat from the sun in month 4, which is of course April, springtime. Obviously, more of that is better. And yeah, so but at that point we're kind of getting to the lower part of the list. So yeah, if it's not obvious, a lot of water, and a good amount of precipitation. Like, don't be like in California where we basically never get any rain. But that's not going to be the Midwest, right? So, do you think, does anyone have any ideas about what places that you've lived in or been to in the Midwest that might or might not represent these traits or things like that? What do you guys think? I don't have a lot of experience in the Midwest. I just got back from Illinois, and it was a great time, and it was a little bit muggy, but I love the
Ground.
thunderstorms.
Yeah, I only visited the Midwest. I was never there long
Babe,
enough
that one is
to.
probably not going to make it.
Go ahead,
Doing
Tom.
some getting
No, that was
cold.
pretty much my thought. I was never there long enough to like go through its growing season or anything. But I'm close to the Midwest now, and um, there seems to be a lot of rain. But apparently, we just went a week without any rain, and yeah, the farmers saying their corn's fucked up right now.
Oh wow, yeah. That's what everyone
Yeah,
was saying in Illinois. They were like, "Oh, you think it's beautiful and lush, but like it's usually not like this." And just wait until they like harvest all the corn. It's all like dead and barren everywhere and fallow. And I was like, "Oh, okay." But when I was there, it was like uh,
green.
a moisture wonderland. Yes.
Yeah.
Desert person Matthew Gates is very impressed.
But yeah, the environment is radically different across the United States, so that's for sure.
That is for sure. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like you even saw like the colors mix quite a bit. Like, closer up to the lake is way different. super heterogeneous across the Midwest. You got like the Great Plains and then like mountain area, kind of.
I
What I
will
know,
say a lot of what we end up consuming ends up being the cultivated stuff. And even in the 90s and early 2000s in Ohio, there were a lot of corn farmers that would clear anywhere from like 100 yards to an acre in the middle of their patch and just throw down a big spot of
uh,
cannabis in the middle of all the rest of their plants. And many places in Ohio were able to make that work. And but that comes into the cultivation, like they're giving it the traditional fertilizers or even organic. If they were, a smaller family farm, then it was something that they managed to make work at scale. And if they're able to grow the corn successfully, then I think oftentimes corn and cannabis are in the similar like DLI rating um, in growth areas. So a lot of the places that can grow corn technically can grow cannabis or hemp. And so that's something to consider. The little bit of the helping hand can really change a lot of things versus a completely natural, untouched.
One thing I also wanted to mention, I mean, so what I want to respond to what you said, but I also want to mention that for those who didn't catch it at the beginning because I didn't say anything about it, this is actually USDA research. So shout out to the USDA for deploying people and spending resources, which you can read about in the credits. The credits. The acknowledgments, and also the authors and contributions. So
yeah. Did they mention? Did they think they found all the feral hemp that was growing, like, or did they end up guesstimating from a consensus sample, like, of these areas?
Oh, so this is the map of the occurrences that they documented. It's not
Okay,
exhaustive though, but
right. But
yeah, like
there's
so
quite a few dots, so yeah.
quite
I
a
want
few
to tear
dots
into the
around.
methods a bit and see exactly how deep they went into the hunt.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Because yeah, there could
It
be
is
a field
interesting to
that
know
they
how they did
missed
it.
that would skew it, right? It's like a huge field. And you know what else? What I was thinking about when you were telling the story about the cornfield with the hemp in the middle or the cannabis in the middle. Now with the drones, dude, I wonder if they can still get away with that shit.
A little bit harder, but they can all just apply for a hemp permit now because it's legal in all 50
Right,
states.
right.
I'll tell you what affected the outdoor growers here, and it wasn't drones, it was fucking Google Earth.
Yep.
Right, right.
As soon as Google Earth came around, then
Rippers delight.
all the rippers and all the cops were loving it.
I
In
know,
there,
right?
next up.
So they have so I'll just read the observance coordinates and data cleaning. So they have herbaria records actually from various places, including the Smithsonian. They also have germplasm resources that they looked at from the USDA. So if yeah, for those who don't know, the USDA does have a bunch of these resources, and I think they're trying to look for ways in which they can benefit growers, commercial primarily, but also I think this will trickle down to home growers. Probably easier than we think, actually, with uh, how strong even other crops like residential and hobbyist growers have been able to like use such information. That's what's cool to me. But yeah, so a lot of this stuff was recorded. You can see there's a table. Uh, yeah. So some
Fun
places are not relevant for various reasons. So that's what this like cleaning kind of refers to.
fun fact, but I haven't confirmed. But I guess if you go to Mount Vernon, where George Washington has spent some time and lived, there are hemp seeds that you can get that were supposedly like the same variety that he grew back in the day. So like the USDA has like preserved in some small regard at least genetic resources of like early hemp varieties all the way back to um, George Washington. So interesting stuff.
That's actually really cool.
That is really cool.
I really wish I remember going to a few years ago, the San Diego Cannabis Farmers Market had like a forget if it was Earth Day, an Earth Day event like maybe a few years ago now, and they had some people who had information from like kind of like American colonial times, and they were looking for because that's information where like right before then because that's around when like taxonomic like the basis for like botanical and animal taxonomy kind of started with like Linnaeus and all that. So for me, it's like, you know, everything like then and like right before is kind of like not well recorded, but there's so much history. And it's just too bad that I think we won't be able to get to it.
As of August 2018, hemp is again growing at Mount Vernon as part of a living museum. This is
Oh,
because of the 2014 federal law to make hemp available for agricultural production purposes. So shout out to good old Mount Vernon, America representing its history sometimes and not, tearing it down. And I think it's interesting for sure.
I think that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Our
I really
cannabis history
wish.
has been so interesting, but this is a very interesting research article, and I think we got through some of the methods there. Do you have any more questions there on the methods, Tao, or did we adequately satisfy your curiosity on how they sampled the populations there?
That's pretty good. I guess they got a good read on stuff, right?
Kansas certainly got a lot from the Kansas school. So, and look at these dots; they're almost like in rows. So it's kind of like like they've
Yeah,
been
they got a
growing a
lot of
lot
samples from
there.
Kansas.
Certainly going
Yeah,
to be
There you
some
go.
bias from places around universities, I would imagine. And then I'd also
right.
imagine there's some places like that are still a little bit more conservative, maybe Ohio being one of them, where if there's a farmer who grows corn or whatever other crop, he might not report that he has the feral hemp or wild hemp or whatever, because maybe he's intentionally provoking it to continue for one reason or another, for his animals or own personal uses. 'Cause no one's
One
testing that
thing
shit.
I know, right? One thing I wanted to mention. So this is the probably the paragraph I was talking about. They talk about in the fall of the American hemp industry, there are remnants of production lines that remained as a growing population, like we call ditchweed. And they talk about how they're genetically distinct from other populations in America, the American feral populations. So those they say here, there's research to back it up. So for people who are curious, they can check out those reports by Woods, Carlson, and Wren, which can also be found at the citations of this paper. They say that populations from Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado exhibit evidence of significant genetic variation, indicative of local adaptation to abiotic and biotic factors, so environmental and pest factors. Although evaluation by Carlson indicated that some American feral hemp populations most closely cluster with older European fiberland races. Another person, Wren et al., I should say, also found that other American feral populations from Kansas and Nebraska closely clustered with land races and feral germplasm or genetic populations from China. China. So,
It's interesting as well.
yeah, so it's interesting because, and it makes sense. That's one thing I've always, that's why I wanted to know about that particular era in history because I feel like people were getting stuff from all kinds of places, and it's not like they were like tracking it with computers and stuff. So like it's interesting to me how much like hemp and textile type cannabis and even non was coming in from like the places of like Central Asia, Middle East, places from Eastern Asia versus places from Europe. And I think there's quite a bit of mixture, it seems like, during that time period. So it wasn't all just from one place, because you might think, oh, well, people coming from Europe, probably it's all from Europe. But no, in fact, it's much more globalized than that, even then. And that's all she wrote.
That's interesting. And you could say maybe that the stuff from Kansas that tends to be descended from the stuff from China could be older yet than the stuff that we got from Europe. If you wanted to go, how old, could it be?
Like
Older
ancient
in like
origin.
what way?
Like in that if we were to,
Oh, like a longer contiguous
Genetically
yeah,
trace
time.
back its
Yeah,
original
yeah.
trace
origin.
back its lineage back from its original, yeah.
I think that's really a good point because it seems like we think east where it is China now or Tibet. Uh,
We
it
had that
seems to be like that
awesome
origin.
hemp
So
research paper in China that had all the different
yeah,
categorizations. So like here's the autoflowers, here's the photo period, here's the, different varieties and stuff. Like It's just such a shame. China's cannabis
Yeah.
policy has gone so awry in
I
modern
wonder what
times.
we've left. Well, during the Cultural Revolution, they destroyed all kinds of cultural relics, and I would not be surprised. And farms were like taken from people and redistributed. Um, so like I feel like a lot of that stuff is just not even
Look at it.
discoverable. Yeah, unfortunately.
She bought it for.
I think he might have his phone maybe in the pocket or in the hand, and it's unmuting occasionally. Sorry, no, I hit mute on you there for a sec. We had an open mic coming through for a second, but it is
We've
different
all been there.
from the US to China to wherever. I mean, hemp has been grown even in Canada to some extent in modern times. Recent years, they've been growing seed and I think even fiber hemp for many, many years, even before they went legal up there, and more recently in the US, but Europe's definitely been producing.
Yeah, I actually follow a Taiwanese like person. I don't even know what she does besides this. I don't know if she's some kind of activist, but she talks about like growing cannabis in Taiwan and hemp and that kind of a thing, and that's kind of neat. But Taiwan is actually pretty mountainous, so I don't think there's a whole lot of room for it. But if people can grow it at home, maybe we'll get maybe there's a benefit from that we can all get communally, right?
I think she's got some courage to grow there for sure, because that's a little too close for comfort, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
that they've got uh, neighbor to their, I think it's west, but uh, that
Oh,
yeah,
Zoe the cannabis lawyer. Better call Zoe if you want to find her on Instagram.
interesting. I'll have to look more into the Taiwanese cannabis community because they are sort of maintaining this separate thing. But I think if at any point China wants to, they'll uh, involve themselves, which would
Oh, I
it's
think
just
China wants to. I don't think there's any lack of want. It's just whether
Yeah,
they
it depends on who
play
you're
with it.
calling. Who I guess it depends on who you mean by China,
Yeah.
right? The people, the government.
Yeah, very good
Yeah.
point. Very good
I'm
point.
talking mainly about the government, but it's just like just from a numbers standpoint, you've got like a billion plus versus how many people are in Taiwan? Just like
I don't even know, but not that much comparatively.
But it's an
it's
island that makes it defendable.
there's these things called ships and
Yeah.
planes, and I don't want to get into the hoary gory
There is
details
this
of
thing called the
war.
United States as well.
That's true. And there's stuff there in Taiwan like semiconductors, which are very important that the not just the US, but the rest of the world need for cars, cell phones, airplanes, even the fucking rockets that they're shooting around have semiconductors, and all the crypto and all the whatever AI and stuff now is running on lots of these fancy chips. And so we're gonna need more technology and more electricity going into the future. We're not going the other direction, it seems. You see it even in the grows. I mean, there's more tech every day. You got people hanging their pulse monitors and their different, CO2 injectors or whatever. Like there's more and more things you can keep constantly plug in and plug in and plug in more things in. DU, AC, like, you can run it pretty minimal, bare bones with just like a few fans, intake and exhaust, or you can get as fancy as you want with the humidifier, dehumidifier, etc.
Think
Absolutely.
also I'm curious about how like American other thing is like at my Pesapalooza last weekend in Rockford and Frankfurt, which is very fun. We had one guy in the second class talk about he was trying to breed, and so he had questions about like genetic resistance and that kind of thing. But like this is like something that people could perhaps work with, and I know it's very in vogue right now to get stuff from like Afghanistan, Pakistan, various other places. I'm curious to see how American feral hemp can be useful, and I think maybe reclaim some of its legacy and potentially be useful not only for cannabinoid production and getting to some of those cool resistances, but also exporting it out to like Africa or other places where I think that like that robustness, especially in the face of like aridity, uh, is really helpful. Because I don't know a lot of people, especially in the US, who are like going and trying to look for ditchweed to use that, except for our friend Aaron.
I was gonna say Aaron the Grower is one of them, and I think I heard Medically Fit talk about it, like the potential of it, and maybe even sourcing it. I think he had some in his hometown. He would drive down the street and see it, and he talked about the potential of that. Just the drought resistance stuff was what he was interested in, and I think a couple of them have been showing either powdery mildew or botrytis resistance, which would be nice to breed into some of the modern polyhybrids that are really susceptible outdoors or even indoors that tend to have some struggles. I'm curious, Noah, you've mentioned in the past, like once at least, you dealt with some powdery mildew, I think, or something like that. Do you remember what strain it was, or if any of them seemed more uh, likely to catch it than the others?
That's a good question. I've often pondered that myself. It happened around when I had open heart surgery, so I wasn't able to be out there, and um, the dehumidifier situation wasn't, I mean, everything was kind of in disarray. I mean, I was, basically fighting for my life, so it really wasn't a priority at the time.
Understandably so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I fought it for quite a while, and then I literally just started over again because, like, I mean, once it gets embedded into your veg and your flower room, I mean, you're really but you know what? I was in the middle of it. I remember using it as a learning experience. And I remember that certain strains were way more susceptible to get it and would show way more signs of it. I'm trying to remember. I know that I was growing platinum. I know that I was growing Cinex. I know that I was growing Gorilla Glue 4. I was actually growing another Gorilla Glue cut that I really hated getting rid of because it was a heavier yielder and it was a very, very rare plant that I'd gotten from a guy. And when I shut it, it was one of the reasons why I did fight it for a while. So, and I'm trying to remember which one was which. I know that the Cinex was less susceptible to it, and I remember even seeing in the lineage of that plant, like the Vortex Cinderella 99, I believe it was. I remember that the lineage in that kind of was like bred in the Pacific Northwest specifically to fight outdoor mildew and mold resistance. But the rest, I mean, it was just so bad that it's not like it was like it wasn't like the plant's fault or nothing. You know what I mean? It just happened.
Environmental
So
and life issues.
environmental, yeah, yeah.
There's more going on. It wasn't, you weren't the primary in the
No.
grow, and then there was also other things stacking on top of it, which
Oh
made it
yeah.
nearly impossible to fight. Which I think sometimes it's best to, like you were talking about, Synax and the Cindy 99 and the Vortex in there going to subcool. He got like I think it was root aphids at one point, and he fought him and tried a whole bunch of different things, and eventually he just decided, screw it, I'm gonna start over fresh, get my clones back from somebody else who has them clean and safe and backed up, and he just started fresh. And sometimes that's what I think is maybe the quickest route to get back to having good clean operation. Some people can fight it and successfully do. I would definitely contact somebody like Matthew if you're gonna go through the process of that and see if it's even worth it, because sometimes before you start investing in the materials and things to, potentially fight it, it might be worth considering what does it look like to shut it down and restart. But definitely more than one way to go about handling that.
Real quick, I'll say that I got rid of, even recently, I got rid of thrips on some of the tips that I got from Matthew. I asked him directly on the show. I got rid of them. I got rid of on my own. I got rid of two different kinds of mites. But man, powdery mildew, that was I mean, you would think it's gone. I got it, and then there it would be in the back of your room, little blight on the leaf, and a little just I mean, man, and those spores just fly around. That one was, I mean, there was just no getting around it because I have gotten rid of stuff, so, but that one was damn near impossible. I'm sure there's ninjas, and that was just above my level at the time.
I think it's a
I mean,
George
for
Strait
me,
song, but you got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, or something like that.
100%.
yeah, I
Kenny
think,
Rogers song, and it's
Kenny
called
Rogers,
Hemp.
sorry. I don't mean to misattribute. I'm not the country. I'm the strain guy, not the country guy.
Oh, that's a good
yeah,
song. It's a really good song.
I
I
know
was,
that too. I'm actually a poker player. I used to play a lot of poker, but I was just so focused on the at hand thing because yeah, that's basically where it was. Like I tried forever, and then I was just like, you know what, this is just too much.
It's good to know when to say when, and you've gotten successfully back in it, so it was worth doing what you did, and we're glad that you fought through and realized, it's sometimes best to restart. And I'm curious if anybody else, I know Tao and Spartan have both done their fair share of outdoor or guerrilla growing. Have you guys had any experience with one maybe being more resistant? At least I know this is anecdotal. We didn't inject any of them with PM or botrytis to see if it would actually resistant on that level, but
I
did you just
witnessed,
ever have a trend or
yeah,
notice?
I witnessed something pretty amazing. One had different strains out in the woods, and one was totally covered with botrytis, and the leaves were getting infected. And one leaf that was infected fell on top of a bud of another plant, and that other plant never got the shit ever. So I would say I mark that up to genetics because I mean they're right next to each other. I don't know what else. I guess there's other factors that could have played in that, but I was so amazed at that other plant. It was actually the blueberry from DJ Short that did not get infected. I was amazed.
I've heard plant health and microbiome can be factors. Like if they
Oh
I
yeah,
think it was
definitely.
Scott from Crease of Soil had something similar happen where he had two plants right next to each other, and one time it was actually the same strain. One was covered in PM
Oh,
and the other one wasn't. And he like tested the soil, and the one had a really healthy soil, and it was, everything was going right. The other one, soil was all fucked up, and everything was kind of going wrong. It was kind of getting overwatered, underwatered, etc. Where the other one was kind of taking its water at the right times, and so I think sometimes that plays into it, and the
true.
microbial makeup. Uh, Even like certain products and things can like build up like the wax layer and things like that to make it harder for the molds to kind of, I guess, like bite or, form their root into the leaf tissue and things like that. So there's a lot of different factors, both naturally and IPM wise, that can play into it. Um, so you said the blueberry was one of the resistant ones, so that's good to hear because I heard the opposite from other people complaining. But I think sometimes it's like when something gets so popular, if it ever gets it at any point, then they'll remember it. And or people like to take shots at the one who's at the top. Everybody's like, "Oh, look at my phone versus the iPhone because my phone's better than the iPhone." It's like, well, you're comparing yourself to the Blueberry, so you're gonna shit talk the Blueberry a lot of the time. And
But
I think it's a way to get
I
sales
think
for people.
what might be also Harry mildew and botrytis are very different. Well, I don't know if they're very different, but they're different. And
They're
I
very
think some
different.
plants,
I think that's a
yeah,
really I think is a good way to put it.
and then
Different
some,
families, right?
Yeah, but a very
well,
different pathogen style.
right.
All around,
And
yeah.
my
Yeah.
whole, yeah, the thing is, they might be getting powdery mildew, and on the blueberry. I don't know, but for like the longest time, I didn't know what powdery mildew was, and then like 2 years ago was the first time I ever got it, and it was indoors actually. Yep.
And isn't there like several different varieties of powdery mildew, like 30 or
Mm-hmm.
something, different strains or something?
Matthew would know, right?
Would you ask?
Aren't there multiple varieties of powdery mildew, like different strains or
Yeah, there's
varieties?
like a bunch of species, and you can't like tell them apart really. And And so because of that, you can't really tell, like, is this powdery mildew going to be a problem or is it not for like cannabis in particular? But what Ty was saying with I like to say that you can't be totally certain because there are other factors, like Jack said, for like resistance. But yeah, if you've got like if like all of your room has it and like one or two don't, especially if they're different or presumably different strains or cultivars. That's the one I'm looking at. That's the one I'm. You should always try to confirm to what degree, because like you said, different species, sure, and then different subspecies that can change and become highly adapted in local areas. So, but if you're just trying to be using what you have access to, like that's pretty anomalous. And so that's what I would say. If you were like a person who could do extra research, that would be the one I would be like looking at and testing out and trying to murder board to see how robust that resistance is for sure.
One thing I do want to stress though is that like especially indoor, obviously not so much outdoor, but you have very limited options outdoor. But indoor, it's like if you're having an issue with powdery mildew, that means there's something off in your environment, and it's going to do you a lot better to invest your money in whatever it's going to take to fix that environment than it is to spend money on ways to treat powdery mildew because you're constantly going to be reinfected by that bad environment, and you're
I
constantly
agree.
chasing
Yeah.
your tail with it. So I know it doesn't sound great, but try to identify the issue of why. What is it about my environment? What is it about my space that's giving me powdery mildew? And then try to treat the problem, the cause, the root of the problem first. It's going to save you a lot of headache down the end, at the end of the road.
Otherwise, you're literally growing powdery mildew. If you
Yes.
like,
Yeah. For everyone else too.
because I think it was Einstein. It's like if you uh like the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And once you get that powdery mildew, if the only thing that you do is just like, I don't know, kill that plant or something, or make very minor changes and never fix the environment that maybe caused it to, the spores to germinate and start to propagate all over the plants in the first place, was like Spartan saying, is because the environment was in a place that allowed them to go. Noah the grower, though, did let us know he's only going to be here for the first hour. So I'm going to kick it over to him for final thoughts and shout outs before you get running.
Yeah. Sorry about the mic mix up there. My phone is old, but I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate the whole panel, and thanks for listening to my insight. And I'll see everybody next week.
Always great having you, Noah, and no worries. It happens to the best of us.
Peace out, Noah.
Cheers.
Have a good one,
Yep.
man.
Keep growing.
Keep
Absolutely.
growing. Hell yeah.
But yeah, I think fixing the environmental issue, because even if your meter on the wall that you have like placed, probably because it's given you we all like to see the best number, right? We want it to look like it's that number that, Jack and Spartan and Tao said on the podcast. I want it to be 77 or 78 or 80 degrees and, 60, 70, however much relative humidity. So you put it in that spot that's going to most closely emulate that. And you might just have one of those meters in your tent or in your grow space, and you're going to say, that is going to be the one I trust, because a man with two watches never knows what time it is. And I've been in that situation. This is why I'm making fun of myself a bit. But I think that's a dangerous situation to put yourself in, because if you believe what you see on that meter, that the whole entire room in your mind now is that relative humidity, then you're in for danger, because unless you have really good airflow and really good exhaust and a really cleanly environment with like constant, filtration of the air and recycling of the air every so many minutes, you're going to eventually run into molds or mildews, because it's so easy for them to germinate in a potentially warm and damp environment with living plant material, and even like the, soils and things like that. Like some of these things can be soil-borne pathogens as well. So when you're cultivating and you're making a cultivation environment, things that tend to thrive in there can pop up, even the bad ones, and it's just a few degrees or temperature, up and down or off to get you into one of those bad ranges. And a microclimate can be just a leaf that's sitting on top of another leaf because you didn't prune. You have two plants next to each other, and now there's 100% relative humidity on that plant, but everything else is at 60 or 70 and it's fine. But you've got two that are literally, if you move that leaf, it's like got water on it. It's perspiring or transpiring, whatever. It's at 100%. It's fighting for survival. And then that can be the little spot that starts to germinate that issue. And then it moves all throughout your grow. So it's worth being diligent. It's worth cleaning up the dead and dying leaves. It's worth giving them a little bit of room to breathe. I would rather have one less plant than plants that are on top of each other. And that's something I think it takes a long
Completely
time to learn.
agree. Even for me, like I can get greedy about that kind of stuff. Even today, it's like in like gardens and stuff. Like personally, I I'll sometimes flaunt the like spacing of certain plants, or maybe not thin, like I perhaps should if I want like the most optimal thing. Because I kind of like the look of overgrowth. So for me, it's just personally kind of cool. And but it does open you up to vulnerabilities. It's not like a video game where, oh, if I cram them all together, I won't have any problems. Like, no, it's really well said, like you said. If you've got like these resistances are really important when you're like totally exposed. And like people ask me at the Pestapalooza, I was telling them like in some ways I'm teaching IPM, but I'm actually teaching like deductive and inductive reasoning, really. Because what you just said about the pH has a lot more to do with that than anything to do with like pests. It's more about how are you reasoning effectively. Because if you're asking the question, oh well, what's the best thing I can use for everything? Like you don't really understand the situation, right? So it's like, and when people are panicked since their first grow, they're even that much more constrained. So the best thing you can do is have that knowledge base moving forward.
I was just about to say the beauty of education is you realize there's not a silver bullet or like bubble boy solution that one size fits all solution. It's a multifaceted, kind of constantly evolving and adapting thing because your environment might be changing and the weather might be changing and the plants that you have coming in and out might be changing. And even seeds, even though it's a smaller percentage, have a percent to expose you to maybe hop latent virus or something of the likes. So there's constantly new things that might pop up that you literally can't even see that might surprise you. And so it's important to always kind of be researching and building further understandings of what is potentially out there and the best ways to fight it. And if it's, worth fighting and how people are possibly doing it successfully.
Do you have any chat questions or anything like that? I wasn't able to see the chat for most of the session since I was emceeing the research, but
I haven't seen any questions from
I,
chat.
I'm seeing a lot of talk about Crocs.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in that though.
Well, I'll tell you, that's what makes you a pro grower is if you wear Crocs. That's a
I
sign
think,
pro or ex-pro grower, they'll be wearing, and it doesn't have to be just cannabis. I'm so an olive gardening
oh yeah, yeah.
because it's a
I do see them
durable,
a lot.
yeah, because it's a durable shoe. It can be rinsed off. You're good to go. You can walk through bleach water to be, an IPM. And it doesn't ruin them in 2 seconds. They're a pretty good shoe for the garden.
They float.
And they're robust. They're
They
float.
float. They float. That's another good one.
That's really helpful actually, yeah. I like that they're robust and like you don't really care if they get like dinged or smashed up against
No one's
Exactly.
something
even
or
mentioned
whatever.
sport mode yet. I mean, come on now, guys.
You can be really relaxed, or you can go into sport mode. They got two different modes. It's pretty
Once
dope.
upon a time, a young Jack Greenstock lined up for a 100-meter dash in a pair of Crocs in sport mode and beat a Division I uh, Ohio University football linebacker who was
Whoa.
wearing shell toes, which are also not ideal 100-meter dash
Okay.
sneaks. But I got him by, you know, maybe 2 arms lengths. But in a 100-meter dash, I was impressed with myself in the Crocs. I lost one Croc at the very end, but sport mode
Two arms length
maintained.
is actually a pretty significant section
Oh yeah,
of
in a
100
sprint,
meters.
That
Yeah.
should have
yep,
been DQ. You losing your croc there, Jack.
it went flying, bro. And if it was your track spike, they would actually let you. It's
I
not a
was gonna
DQ unless like it hits somebody or fucks up the race.
I was gonna recommend Bare Feet, dude. Now that I'm over here in the real Amish country, dude, there's kids. They just run around barefoot, dude, 24/7.
That's how I grew
Real
up, brother.
Amish country.
I was in near Amish country, but in Ohio, the like only worry was like you step on a bee and you get stung, but that's not the end of the world, man. You have a sore
Dude,
foot for
man,
a
you
little
ever
bit.
step in shit barefooted, dog shit barefoot?
Can't you
There,
get
That ain't
those like
fun.
yeah, can't you get like
yeah, there's like a plantar, like a foot ward or something like that if you step on dog shit, but
oh oh no
Nice
not
one,
thanks.
good.
Fly.
That's a different kind of IPM.
Just
But
so
yeah,
I can get on the record, I recommend Crocs, not the dog shit, the Crocs. I do recommend those.
humans lasted for a long time, I think, without until they started making shoes.
Yeah, like not individually,
Hey Tao,
but yeah.
come out with me on one of my 10 to 16 mile hikes. You go barefoot
I'll
and I'll
go
wear
barefoot.
my hiking shoe and you'll
Well,
see.
if I spent my whole life barefoot, I'd be able to do that. But
I'll
I
invite
can maybe
anybody
work up
who
to it.
is one of those barefooter people to come out with me and go hiking. I don't care how long you've been barefoot running. If you go on a hike with
Oh,
me, your feet
Jack,
will be absolutely fucked.
Yeah,
dude,
the
I went
degraded
to.
granite is no joke.
So you guys know that I was a competitive eater for like a year or two, right?
Decomposed granite.
I went to this event in Brooklyn. It was like St. Patrick's Day. It was either corned beef and whatever it was. It was an eating event. And I went into the porta potty, took a couple hits off my pipe, and I walked out. This kid went in after me. He walked right back out, started hassling me. He's like, I know that was really good weed. I know you got the good weed. I know you got the good weed. So I'm talking to him. I looked down. I thought he was wearing like black leather shoes. the kid was walking around barefoot, dude, in Brooklyn. Like we were at a field, but he obviously did not wear shoes for a long ass time, dude. I stared at his feet for like a long time, amazed. All right, I'm sorry I got off track there, but I just
No,
had
it's
to
all good.
say
We were
that.
talking about Crocs, and I was gonna ask, do you rock Crocs with socks or do you go barefoot? That's a garden question for you.
If it depends. So if it's cold outside and I'm going to go outside, actually I have Crocs with fur on the
I was
inside.
gonna say, do you have the winter
It's
ones? Because
must.
I did when I was in Ohio.
I
You gotta be
definitely do.
fancy with it.
Yeah, I
Oh, I've
definitely
never
do.
heard of this, but that seems like
I have
stereotypical fantasy female armor
I have
trope.
three I
Is
have
that really
three
warmer?
pairs.
Like, is that
Yes,
helpful?
it is. It's definitely
Oh,
warm.
they are, dude. Your feet will fucking sweat in those things if you wear
Well,
them in fall even.
because they block the holes. See, so regular
Yeah.
pants have the holes, but this fur lining blocks those holes, so you don't get the wind coming through.
That's pretty amazing. What do you
Yeah,
guys think of those? And this will be the last question about shoes, I suppose. Hope. But you guys ever get those toed shoes?
I haven't tried those. I wouldn't be opposed to it, I guess, but
I
not
had a
all the
friend
ones
who
I've
got
ever seen are
really into
expensive.
them like 8 years ago, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I love hiking in them, blah 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 blah." But it might be nice as a work shoe.
I
It's
was
The
like,
gonna
only
say, can
problem
you walk around public wearing them or what? Like, could you go to work in them?
you can,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, can, I
dude,
mean, yes,
I would be walking
you could
around.
make the decision
I'd
for
be
your
doing
life
like,
to do
I'd be
that.
Well, you
doing
know what
Yes.
I
spin
mean. Would it
kicks in
be
them.
appropriate though? Is my real
They're
question.
pretty
I
ugly
guess
looking, Tao. They're
you
pretty
could
ugly
do
looking.
whatever you want. I could
Oh,
go
there's
in and
mine
make
right there.
Yeah.
The one that says Crocs Kids Black Classic is the one that I have, but mine's
Right
not
here, yeah, the
as a
regular
big
standard.
foot.
They got the puffier
Yeah.
ones though too.
Well, that's
And
got
the
heel
my
on it too. Damn.
look at
my
like
feet have
these have
never
like more of a
experienced a
boot
crop.
style. This one's got a heel, yeah.
It looks
Check
like
out the
they're
Crocs, man.
rises for the short people. There you go.
Yeah, and like this is the style I was talking about. Like in the winter, you wear
That's the
these
ones I got.
things,
Yeah.
bro,
Those are
your feet
so
are
nice.
sweating. Like they're straight up
Damn,
You could go
Oh
barefoot in those
wow.
in the wintertime and you're
hot.
all good.
my feet have
I
never
agree.
experienced the croc.
Hell yeah.
I was before I moved to California and got shamed into wearing rainbows and
Shamed into
non-Croc
wearing
shoes.
rainbows.
I I just don't, yeah, I'm not in the situation to wear Crocs as much anymore. It's more so cross trainers. I'm fucking wearing hiking
Dude, man,
shoes,
I need
hiking
my
boots,
Birkenstocks, dude. My Birkenstocks,
the
man.
Birks.
I just got some what Hoka?
Hoka's are
Hokia?
good. They're a good
Hoka,
running shoe.
yeah. I got some
HOKA.
I got some trail running shoes, and those are amazing. Like a cloud
You could come
with a
look
lot
for
of
turkeys with
cushion.
me in Cleveland National Forest
There we
sometime.
go. There we
Go running
go.
All I
around.
gotta do is drive down the street to see turkeys myself. Those fuckers are all over the place, man.
Does Michigan have a season for them? Can you go take them with a
Ah,
bow or a
yeah,
shotgun?
yeah, yeah, they definitely do. But a wild turkey, you maybe get their breast, so you're killing something just to get a little bit of a one meal, maybe.
The thing is, like, you can get some pretty big ones, and on top of that, like, it's more like the Native American way. You take what you want, and then nature takes care of the rest. So 100% of it
Yeah,
ends up going to use.
I'm okay with it. I'm better than bouncing off my car, man. So yeah, go out there and shoot them fuckers. They'll do a lot of damage to your car.
Oh, I know. It's definitely nice to have population control of things that are
Having
large
problems
enough
with the
to
deer
cause
too.
damage.
They just changed much of the rules on the hunting because they were getting too big of a deer population. It's wild when people try to have an argument with me about hunting is bad for the population. We never had deer population until we started hunting, and they started managing the population. And now we have nobody's interested in hunting. Well, very few. Now they can't even manage. They're paying people to like snipers to come into like the local parks and stuff.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh yeah.
That was my dad was the vice mayor when I was a kid, and they had a culling is what they called it, and there were so many people dying in car accidents that the city was like, hey, there's been 15 people that died this month from hitting deer. Like we gotta bring this population down a bit. And then what they did was donate like some X thousand pounds to the local homeless food banks of the different like venison and deer meat that
Oh
they got.
yeah. That's awesome.
So it was like a win-win and for a lot of people other than the deer, unless you're a deer activist, like the people that would come to the council meetings with like one of those target for archery, like the deer, that you shoot with a bow. This
yeah,
this girl I went to school with brought it in and was hugging it and like protesting that the people were shooting deer despite people dying in their cars all the time.
That's too bad because that could have been like a surgeon or anyone really. I mean, what you do in life is not the ultimate value, but like certainly it doesn't help, especially in rural places where like it's fine to say like, oh yeah, everyone's fine, but when you're in a rural place and like there's only a few doctors and one of them gets killed because he hits a deer or
It's a major
whomever.
change on a community, honestly.
Yeah,
It can fuck up a town
100%.
and a family. It's tragic if somebody's family tree ends like that.
Plus
Uh,
too much of them, and they start to give diseases to each other and communicate diseases to
Well,
other
it
animals. Yeah,
kills off all the other small animals and plants, getting back
yeah,
to like the growing side of things.
Farmers
Like
really fucking have issues with them taking and just
that's a good point.
mow
they
down
eat
the crop.
cannabis.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
Oh
They love
yeah, oh
cannabis.
yeah.
It's
One of
fucking
I
Smiley's
wild.
like
have.
stickers or logos was like like him wrestling a deer to get the cut from it because it was like one of those stories on the wormhole or fucking talking shit with the eagle way back in the day, like Smiley wrestling the deer to get the cut back or something out of its mouth. But it's a all too common occurrence. One of the first times I ever got high in Ohio, I was walking to a friend's house and there was like a field we cut through, and I thought the cops were coming after us, and it was a fucking deer running by us. And it's one of the scarier moments of my life because in the dark, they're fucking pretty big, man. You don't want to get hit by a deer running full
No,
speed.
it's
You don't
that's
want to ever
mass.
get hit
That's
by
a
Oh,
lot of
that.
mass
dude,
acceleration, right? The thing is that they
you
just
get
go. They
fucked
just
up.
can clock. They can clock such a fast like gate like so quickly.
From start,
Uh,
yeah. Zero to
yeah, from
like fucking
start.
you up real quick as it
Yeah,
got startled.
immediately. Um, like mid stride. I was gonna
Fencing,
ask.
like Mendo Dope does those like metal fences around like the trunk of their plants. Stuff like that actually makes a big difference if you can
Oh,
put in the infrastructure to protect your garden, not just from deer, but from, rodents and other things. Like you can really prevent
I
a lot of
just
stuff
happened
with
to
physical
watch.
barrier.
I have to watch a segment on Reuters News. There's some small island in Asia that is infested with deer. The local people, and they're not allowed to kill them because they're considered livestock somehow.
I think it's the
But the
Nakamura
whole
deer in Japan.
maybe I don't know, but they have to build. They put fences like they have to like enclose their houses in
Yeah,
fencing so
yeah.
that they don't get fucked
They're
up.
like sacred. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And it's they said it's just like, and they showed pictures. It's overwhelming. It was crazy.
I saw a deer in Ohio jump a fucking 10-foot highway barrier, run out and get hit by a fucking semi, and then like stand up and run like 20 feet and try and jump back over the barrier before it fucking died on the side of the road. They're fucking crazy impressive, the amount of strength and wherewithal. But sadly, whenever they get hit, they like either die right there or go die in the woods somewhere. So I think it's more ethical to, I guess, maybe just have its life end like that in
I've
a
seen him
second.
jump a fucking 6 foot fence without running, just from standstill, just
Right.
fucking hop it like it was a rabbit. I was like, what the
It's,
That's
it's
fuck?
it's so
hilarious because you don't
amazing.
expect it from a meteor kind of big animal like that to be so fucking athletic, but they
Well, like
sure as hell
and
are.
imagine what like that old Irish. For those who don't know, like the ancient like Irish elks and things like that that like used to live but no longer exist with apparently like magnificent horns that were just so massive, and they too were large.
You don't even
Like
have to imagine. Just look at a
like dire
fucking
deer, dire deer
moose.
from like D&D, dude. What
Look at a moose.
moose? Yeah, meat. Yeah, mooses.
Oh
Meat
They're
is
yeah.
fucking crazy. They're as big as a goddamn school
You
bus.
say
They're like an
meese.
elephant, dude. I seen one that was like an elephant, man. They're just
Moosinii.
huge.
It's like that's like a dinosaur in real life, bro. Those things are fucking
Yeah, the way
crazy.
that they sound too. Those like ungulate animals with their like
Grunts.
ghostly like howling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they grunt, they howl, they make all sorts of crazy ass sounds, and they're just like 3 times, like 10 times as fucking big as you, and they could just roam around and like
they could just stomp you like into the
Yeah,
dirt.
they just don't give a fuck. Same thing with elk. They just don't give a fuck. So they get to be noisy as they fucking want, and they are noisy as fuck. They just don't care. They don't have a predator to come get them. They don't care.
Yeah.
Out there for the world to just be like, yeah. They're like the equivalent of the humans of the animal kingdom, I guess. They're just out there. God, I couldn't believe I camped one time near where there was some elk, and I couldn't believe the fucking noise they made in the morning. It's yeah, it's bad. They don't
dude,
shut.
Alaska IPM has to be crazy. You're like looking out for fucking grizzly bears,
I would be
moose.
I would be loaded up. I would be the great white hunter, man, because I'd be like, no, I'm sleeping, so I'm gonna get every fucking elk within walking distance from me, and I'll just put them in the
All
freezer and
all
only
your friends
enjoy
are eating
every
good
bite.
meat.
Yeah,
You're gonna be like Joe
everybody's
Rogan.
eating good, and everybody's sleeping good.
You like dig like a moat and have it's like it becomes like a compound after a couple of years, you know? Like that's basically it, right? Like, and that's the thing though, is like one of the biggest questions I got at Pestapalooza was basically some flavor of I have an outdoor garden in my backyard. how do I deal with this pest? And one of them was like earwigs, one of them was like, and then like also slugs or snails. And like the issue is that um sometimes like your landscape is not right. Like you have all these like stones or like squares of like brick that you might use as like a step or whatever. It's all pretty and nice and whatever, but like they'll like live under there. And so like unless you want to make an environment that's not um like hospitable or like really suitable for them, it's actually really difficult, I think. And like that's like the unsaid like I don't have like an answer except like that I'm ethically like gonna recommend. Like you could like spray every day or constantly some like nefarious compound, but that's not really the recommendation people are asking for. Um, so like that's also an important thing. Like if you live in a desert and you have like a lawn, you use a lot of water, like that's gonna like things are gonna want to be in your lush grass backyard. Does that make sense? Like consider that like when it's dry and arid, all the bugs are gonna look for food and you're gonna stick out like a giant like radar. I don't know. That's an important thing to consider.
I know not just deer are attracted, but many like goats and things like that. So if you're like by a farm or like there's free ranging cattle even, they'll come and eat your
Exactly,
cannabis
yeah.
plants.
Yeah.
They get real curious and then they find out and they like it and they'll come back, they'll take a few bites and then they'll fucking leave it and you'll be like, what the fuck got this? And then you come back the next day, there's a few more bites taken. You're like, what is going on? You see people put like trail cams up and stuff and they're like, oh my God, this my neighbor's stray cattle or whatever came over and ate my plant.
I
It's
bet
I've
boar would be
never
really bad.
it blows my mind how many different varieties of things it ends up being. Like when somebody first sees it, and they're like, "What the fuck was this?" And then like I get the after action report of like, "Oh, it was X, Y, or Z," and it's like there's so many different things. Even like sometimes cats will fucking jump in there and start eating your plants.
I just had some people from Brazil contact me about leafcutter ants taking down their cannabis plants, the leaves and the branches. Yeah, good luck with marabunta. Okay,
I was just
like
gonna say, I don't know what you
I'll
tell them. Get what do you
I'll
call it? An
I'll be
anteater.
honest.
The
You're getting
anteater
an
and chain them to
anteater.
the stalk.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, yeah, it must be you don't have an ant problem. You have an anteater problem. Is that
Employ
is
your anteater for IPM.
yeah, exactly.
Put it on a little
No,
leash.
I mean I hear they're good. I hear I've actually eaten leafcutter ant before as like a dried snack. Very nutty. Kind of a novelty food though. I feel like the larvae might be interesting.
Oh, that sounds disgusting. Not interesting. Be fat.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, I mean they're voracious, right? So like they can I forget the statistics, but like a mature leafcutter colony one can like defoliate like a tree of like a certain size like pretty fast. Like one tree, they only had that one tree that they could go to. So like that could be a really huge problem. And like how do you control them in like a forest or near like the yeah, that's
They're
gonna
not
be hard.
stopping.
They're not stopping, right? You can't like divert them.
They just keep on going until you either kill them or they run out of shit to eat or some other
Yeah.
thing comes along, like a
Go, you follow,
Bavaria.
find their nest, and you pour that liquid aluminum down like they do on those videos.
Oh,
That'll take care of them suckers. Might be expensive. That's an expensive IPM though.
that might be kind of. I mean, you could choose
Aluminum's
something
not
like
that expensive. You could take a
Yep,
mm,
bunch of
melt
old
down aluminum
cans.
cans. Yeah, there you
Well,
go.
Bavaria, that the fungus might work because they do feed on fungus. Um,
That'd be my approach would be Bavaria or some other sort of
but you don't want
pathogenic
to.
fungi.
The thing is that you don't want that to like get. Uh, I would just be concerned about like because the leafcutter ants do serve a purpose in the environment. So I don't know.
You don't want
It'd
to
be
go full
nice.
scorched earth and
Not when it
destroy all
It,
of
comes,
them.
not when it
it'd be
comes to
nice.
my cannabis plant. They need to be somewhere else, serve a purpose somewhere else, or die.
There's probably enough leaf cutters. I don't think they're
Yeah.
a
Critically
threatened
endangered.
group. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty
Look
sure there's
quickly,
different
look quickly
species.
you turned on that. See, I like that.
There's a Mitch
Yeah.
Hedberg joke where he talks about rice and he says, I like rice because when I'm hungry, I could eat like 1,000 of one thing.
Yeah.
I feel like
Oh,
that would apply to ants. It's like,
maybe
oh, I
you
was
should
really
eat the
hungry
ants.
and I want to eat 1,000 of one thing. But I'm not a bug eating advocate. I know Dr. MJ spent some time in South America or something where they commonly did it. And it's like a delicacy, and certain Matthew's eaten some, and
Leafcutter ants would be one of those South America, exactly.
the
I've
what's
eaten
the
ants before. They don't really have a flavor at all to me.
they're whatever you flavor them with for the most part. Yeah, I mean they're not even like that substantial. So like when we like, I'm an advocate, but like it's not the same as like steak or
I
something
just
like
don't want it to
that.
be the new protein. Yeah, I don't want it to be like you're gonna own nothing and eat bugs and you'll like it type shit. Fuck that.
Yeah, I mean like I think that that particular soundbite has done a lot of harm, unfortunately, in that way. Because I actually don't think it's like a big deal. I think that
I'm fine with it as an alternate protein. I'm just saying, like, I don't want it to replace all other I fucking like peanuts and shit too. Like, there's plenty of great protein that's not like an insect or an animal. Um, I was at the store the other day and I looked at peanuts and it blew me away because it's like when you look at pound prices as a weed grower, you just makes you start to think. Peanuts was $2 for or $6 for 2 pounds. Then I looked at
Mhm.
macadamia nuts in the same aisle. You
Oh,
get
that's gonna be way
six
higher.
six
Yeah,
ounces for 13.99,
like
and this
twelve
was just
Yeah.
dollars. I was gonna
roasted
say,
salted.
yeah,
So we're talking like it's 25, almost $30 a pound
Wow.
versus three
yeah,
dollars a pound for the
Well,
peanut.
think
Peanut
about it
has more
too.
protein.
yes,
Two different things too, because the peanut grows in the ground and it's like on the root of the plant, and then the macadamia nuts collected off a tree.
yeah,
And they're like grown in
and
Hawaii, so they're fancy, like
Yeah.
Malawu, whatever brand. And
oh geez,
they want to charge you more money to put it in their little fancy jar or whatever. But even like the budget, cheap store brand, whatever, the cheapest one you could get that's like not fancy, just roasted, salted. And I agree, it grows from a tree. It's different than growing under the ground. But like when you're talking about like nut versus nut, or it's not, it is kind of like apples to oranges because they're literally, like you're saying, one is so much more difficult to cultivate. And I understand that
well,
comes
and
with the higher costs per pound.
if you're judging them on just protein, that's one thing. But
Yeah, there's
like
other
macadamia nuts have
micronutrients.
like selenium and stuff like that in them, is my understanding. However, the other thing is that like it's just so much more logistically easy, I think. The first thing that comes to my mind is like growing potatoes, growing peanuts, not the same thing, but
I
like
love
as a ground.
potatoes. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I just feel like yeah, it's a really important it's a really good point actually. Um
Shout out to Anything Grows. She was over this during the week, I think it was, and I harvested some of my first potatoes of the season, and I have some of the purple ones. I actually planted a few different, but some of the purple ones, what we ended up digging up, and we had purple mashed potatoes in our little chicken KFC bowls, but they're, homemade, much better.
I like recreating, like reverse engineering the stuff that I used to eat from junky food or whatever, and like having it, whether, it's like a breakfast sandwich or a fucking KFC bowl, that you just make at home with your own potatoes and your own chicken and your own, gravy or whatever. I love, my wife is actually a much, much, much better cook than I am. I think I'm decent actually. Like I can throw down, but she is fucking really incredible. And it's nice to make your own, not just grow your own, farm to table type stuff. But
Love it.
you are right, Matthew, that the macadamia has a lot of other things. Like I just Googled nutritional values. Uh, Peanuts are primarily for their protein. They have B3, B9, magnesium, um, fat, protein, carbs, etc. Then
was I right
macadamia,
about the selenium?
omega 3, 6, and 7, which is different. They're low in sugar. 1 ounce of macadamia is 204 calories, 21.5 grams of fat, 2.24 grams of protein. It doesn't say anything about selenium, but I bet you're probably right if you
Oh, I
remember
meant
that.
for the macadamia nuts.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I
Okay,
didn't see it
okay.
on either one, but if I Google that specifically, I bet you it would come up potentially.
Sure. But yeah, like yeah, I definitely am a big fan of like diversifying the kinds of foods and the kinds of proteins that we get and stuff. Like for example, hey, you know what? I'm also not a massive advocate because we already have things like we have insects of the ocean, right? We have shrimp and lobster. And lobster used to be famine food, right? People used to, if you give somebody lobster, it's like an insult. Nowadays it's delicacy, partly
Yeah,
for
in
branding.
Canada, that's what the poor kids ate. In one of the comments, I was like watching some history thing about Canada, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we poor kids on the coast, we were eating the lobster while like they're eating some other, I think it was a chicken or bird or whatever."
Yeah, I was reading where they were feeding early prisoners lobster.
Yeah. was like the bottom feeder stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny how things come around with food.
You won't see me eating it, but that's okay.
There's in 100
Yeah,
grams
no
of
thanks.
macadamia nuts, you get 3.6 UG, or the little, I don't know what the actual thing, but there's a little bit of selenium in every 100 grams of macadamia nuts. So that is a slight benefit as well.
Yo, how about the cashews? Tell us all about the cashews, Jack. No, I'm
We're
joking.
talking about nuts. Let's go to the nut aisle.
Yeah. Let's just
Let
Well,
me
I don't
take you
know,
to the
man.
nut aisle at my local grocery store.
I like
yeah.
cashews, dude. They're legit.
Dude, my thing is just a handful of nuts for anybody every day. It doesn't matter if it's cashews, almonds, peanuts, whatever. If you just take
They
like at
do
least a
say it's
handful, it's
really
good for you.
healthy. Yeah,
Well, that's the
nothing
thing.
to
Like,
say.
I mean, like let's talk about. I mean, considering the context of the show, like hemp or cannabis seeds and nuts and that kind of stuff. I'm super. I don't know. Like, it would be cool. Like in 20 or 30 years, maybe. I don't know how long it would take, or if anyone would even do this. But like growing cannabis for grain, but like making the grain like really big. Like
They
somehow,
did.
like
They kind of do.
they
They have
kind of do
seeds.
that, right? Yeah, I've seen
Yeah,
some. I've seen some of that. Yeah,
that
Tao, you actually
specific
introduced me, I think,
strain
to some examples that were
that
particularly
almost
grand.
pea-sized. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like large seeds.
yeah, really large seeds for the hemp herds.
Just one more thing
You
on
know,
the nuts was that there is selenium in peanuts. I'm sure somebody in the chat has already pointed that out, but I just Googled that as well. 72 micrograms per kilogram. So they both get, my thought was just the fact that one costs 4 times the amount per pound. And you're like,
100%.
you're looking at, you know,
But it'll go rancid for, and also it'll last less time. I think they're more oily. So like peanuts will also, I think, last a lot longer if you prep it right.
sorry, go ahead, Tao.
I was gonna say it would be cool if someone like specifically bred for cannabis seed that was really sweet, but you could just chew them up, eat them down. I
Yeah, I
think that would
think
be cool.
I
Yeah,
I think yeah, I would love
Like
to
a little
like
candy.
bingo.
yeah, you could like it could be an almond replacement. I'm seeing in the chat people are clowning on all on almonds for good measure because they're so like thirsty. That's another thing. Like cannabis, like it grows pretty good for. I think it's pretty water tolerant, and you can certainly. I think we could certainly increase that tolerance.
It's dry farmed. I mean, there's
Exactly. We,
Sunibus
we
in
you could
Humboldt,
even. Yeah, yeah,
straight up
yeah.
dry farmed, not watered once the whole entire season. They just go on the rain and natural groundwater.
I'm a super exactly, and the more people doing that, I think is great because for all the benefits in that way. And I think like if you could like get like a protein or like a seed or that thing that you could grow, like with cannabis, it's like it grows so well like bamboo, it feels like to me. I love that. So then you can also so you get the food item and then you also can have the I guess you could have the stalk and the leaves or other things too, like for livestock feed. I'm super excited about that. Actually, I think they're approving that in Mexico right now. I'm talking with some people in Oaxaca and other places. I'm excited to try to support that because if they're not doing it in my country, that's fine. You snooze, you lose. But I really wish that it actually becomes a bigger issue in the U.S. Um, but I feel like people aren't as excited for that for obvious reasons. So we'll
Once
see.
U.S. cattle come around, because they're farmers at the end of the day, and they're going to look back and start finding out the history of pre-1930s and even really pre-1970s because there was still the medical ability for people to grow hemp from the 30s to the 70s up until the scheduling of all the drugs and all that. But if you look back, the cattle that were eating hemp were doing just fine. They had, some report lower health issues, and there are some reports that even it made the quality of meat go up. And maybe there was probably not well studied, but trace amounts of endocannabinoids being put into the meats that people were consuming, whether it's CBD or THC, like on very,
There's
very small levels.
a paper just came out about that. I could share it with you guys. I don't have the copy, but or unless the guy who shared it got back to me. Or
The
keep
milk
going. Let me
Either
let
too.
me
way,
check. Let
it
me
would be
check.
cool just to, reference that because I do think that there is some potential, even like I mentioned Luther Burbank in the past, who bred the spineless cacti, and there were studies where he was feeding the cattle and horses spineless cacti, and to some extent, like the ones that got hooked onto it would not even need to drink water. It was like so hydrating that like you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink kind of thing. They wouldn't drink water ever because they were raised on this cacti that was so hydrating and nutritious and healthy for them. And like the reports on the cattle were like higher yields for the meat and better health and things like that. So I think it's important to maybe go back to our roots in some extent to change the feed. If we're giving them like chickens eat corn and stuff like that, if you see a chicken in the wild, it'll eat everything from insects to worms to, mice to anything. Like they'll eat each other. I hate to say it,
I was gonna
but
say other chickens.
yeah, I've seen it. Like a baby chicken got eaten by a full-size chicken. Like it
So
happens.
funny. Yeah.
It can happen quick and like violently, and it's like holy shit. Like you can understand why chickens are like the only real modern dinosaur that we're I think aware of, or them and crocodiles and alligators and maybe sharks. But chickens are on that list, which is kind of gangster in their own regard.
Pretty much all birds.
Yeah, true. Hardcore, but I think they go hand in hand with cannabis sometimes. And if you do a good job keeping them separate, you can benefit from like even I mentioned Vic High in the past. He used chicken manure and was able to work that into a compost that worked into a super soil that ended up growing good cannabis. So there's symbiotic kind of farming that can go about with those things. I know some stuff like you would not want to use. Earlier we were talking about like the Crocs and running barefoot. You wouldn't want to like compost dog shit for most dogs in most cases. Some people do, but I think it's important to realize what you're putting in. And we're getting a little bit of a share screen here from it looks like a X or Twitter account post. Maybe I don't know if I'm not live on my YouTube over here, but I can see it on the Zoom. It looks a little small for me. But Matthew, you talk through what you're showing us now. You are muted.
Oh yeah, there we go. So this is from LinkedIn. This is this was published in the Journal of Food and Chemical Toxicology. It's called Cannabinoid Residuals in Tissues of Lambs Fed Spent Hemp Biomass and Consumers Exposure Assessment. I wasn't able to get a copy yet. I did reach out to try to get one. Maybe we can talk about it next time or something. But
Yeah, it's a good teaser because we've only got like 20 minutes left. Spartan's going to be out of here in like 5, so I don't think we'd get too deep into it, even if we had the article. In all honesty, and I think it would be interesting enough
oh,
for a
of
future
course.
science topic for sure.
Oh, I wouldn't have brought it up. Yeah. But like, yeah, it's just cool that they're looking at this kind of stuff. This, and if you want to look it up, anyone who's watching, they can copy this or.
I love when this stuff happens live because like the last time I can recall at least specifically, Dr. MJ was like, I was stressing how I thought drought stress was beneficial in cannabis. And he's like, oh, by the way, there's this University of Guelph study that looked just at that. And he like shared that with
Exactly.
me. And then it like backed up some, crazy Jack ramblings. Occasionally, every once in a while, a blind squirrel finds a nut. And so I throw out all my ramblings and some stuff sticks, but it is interesting. Just, I'm a history fan, really. And a lot of it is just people have we've changed, but a lot of us in a lot of regards the human being has stayed the same, and so have the cattle and so have the chickens, right? They've been around for hundreds thousands of years living symbiotically, and like especially with the cannabis plant, it was relatively rare the last 100 years that we sort of got wacky about the green tobacco, but fucking cannabis got so much hate and vitriol and racism and weird stigmas for 1930 up until even still to this day. I still hear at council meetings in California mothers against cannabis that are like, we can't get dispensaries in our thing because it's going to put cannabis in the children's hands and it's going to make them lazy drug addicts and they're going to drop out of school and be no good for nothing low lifes, and then they're going to go on to fentanyl and they're going to be zombies in the street and dead and blah blah blah. I'm like, this is very, very lightly paraphrasing stuff that I've actually heard at council meetings in San Diego, LA, etc. So those demonizations still exist and get
It's
pushed out there.
tragic. We could be so much better. I'm definitely like a San Diego County, you know,
Do they not
superiorist.
realize?
Like, come on.
Do they not realize it's been legal there for so long that none of that
Exactly.
happened yet?
And it's
Yeah,
funny
that's
because you
the
have like groups of people like coming out with like their businesses that have been doing it legally, and they're like, we haven't sold any kids, we have security, we ID everybody who comes in. Like this is like the safest way to not get your kids cannabis. Like some drug dealer is going to sell it to them on the street if you're worried about calling them that and labeling them that way. But ultimately, like I was in middle school when I started being able to have access to this shit. It's not like it was hard to get, and I was in a red state, bro. Like it was fucking available. Like seventh, eighth grade, like people had the shit, and it was widely available. So the fact is it's out there for the kids, whether the parents want them to have access to it or not. And I think it'd be probably better if there's at least some level of, regulation controls and people trying to do it right. That being said, I think there are still a lot of people in the gray, unregulated, black, whatever, illicit market, whatever you want to call it, that are doing things probably better still than people in legal markets. So it doesn't make, just because we regulate and legalize stuff doesn't mean that it's like all of a sudden clean, safe, and healthy, or that the people that aren't playing within the rules of the modern uh, society are doing it in a way that is going to kill you, right? Because for how long we had it with no regulation and people just happily smoked it, like, 60s, 70s, 80s. No one was talking about lab tests and shit until I started spraying paraquat. Nobody was really concerned, and that was like a government like anti-cannabis thing again. So, um, for the most part, it's if you're growing it without spraying noxious chemicals deliberately onto it, then I think you're going to be pretty good, whether it's pesticide or deliberate stuff like that with paraquat to dissuade people from using it.
I want to shout out to Fat Freddy's cat who just said thanks for doing these shows, Spartan Grown. I like that, man. No problem, man. I love doing these shows. I would do it. I love hanging out with these guys. It's fun for me to do, but it's good to get positive feedback too. So thank you for that. I'm gonna take this time to just jump out of here. Uh, but I think you brought up a good point with the not knowing your supply, and I'm going to say this because I say it all the time, but I think, the answer is to grow your own. And if you can't grow your own, find somebody that you know and trust and love to grow your own. Because the answer is still to grow your own. That way you don't have to worry about somebody with greed in their minds taking shortcuts. And that's the answer, man. And that's the answer. And sometimes just growing it is therapeutic in itself. So really want to stress grow your own. And yeah, and much love to all the chat that I see out here. Much love to the panel members. Much love to people listening after the fact. Keep growing. Oh, and
Okay,
catch me on
yes,
Mr.
Spartan.
Bros Grow Show. I'm fucking up, man. I did a couple dabs during the show. I'm going to the Mr. Bros Grow Show next, I think, in about 15 minutes. So I'll see you guys over there. But yeah, much love, guys. We'll see you later. Keep growing.
Have a great one, Spartan. Thank you so much.
Later, Spartan.
I totally agree, though. We always advocate, obviously, the cheap home grow, getting people to grow your own. And if you can't, trying to find somebody who can supply you. And for so many different reasons. But like in the paraquat case, that was because it was outdoor, it was exposed. Like in our case, most of us are, well, many of us are growing indoor. I won't say, I can't speak for all of us, but it changes year to year. We have different greenhouse amounts and outdoor growers and indoor growers, but uh, a significant chunk every year are indoor cultivators. And I think with that control, you're not letting anybody into your house to spray paraquat onto your plant, right? So, or even if you're renting your space, you at least in this country have the right and freedom to say no to people at the door. You're not coming in here, so they can't fuck with your stuff like they can if they have a helicopter that just flies over and sprays shit, whether it's for mosquitoes or other shit. It's like sometimes it's directly attacking the cannabis, sometimes it's just going after some other things. But now you've got a bunch of pesticide that is dousing your crop. So having that control of being indoor and having air filtration and things like that gives you a lot more control. And I couldn't agree more with Spartan. I need to get back on the train. I'm finishing up 50 strains of purple right now. I've got less than 20 strains left. I've got all of them completed with like who made it, where it's from, how long it takes to finish, and smells, chemical profiles, and things like that. I'm just finalizing photos and my stories and backgrounds, my personal experience with it, kind of a little bit about the breeder, where it came from, if there's any sort of controversy or notable stories and things like that. I try to include stuff like that. But yeah, it's coming along. So it's been a fun process. This one took a lot longer, just life. And I think you learn in the first one some things that you would want to change and do different in the second one. And so I'm trying to make this one even better. So it'll be worth the wait for sure whenever it does come around. And I know we got about 15 minutes left. I'm curious if Tao, if you have any interesting thoughts, questions, or general ideas that have been kicking around your head, or if there's anything earlier that we talked about on the podcast that we didn't get to touch on that you'd like to dive deeper into.
Not necessarily, but I am intrigued with that article about the cannabinoids in the lamb's tissue meat. Because yeah, I heard this one professor from University of Ohio, I guess, saying how even just a really small amount of THC, though not CBD, But I would think there's a lot more CBD in like feral hemp that the cows might have been chewing on back in the day. But he claimed like, yeah, very little bit would be very beneficial, especially to old people. So yeah, I think that definitely was a thing, and that's partly why people might have been healthier, or appear to be healthier in the past. Um, and what has been rattling around my brain, I am stuck on the praying phenomena of cannabis plants and what causes it. And there's a lot of people that think they know, say they know, but I don't know if they know. And it's just a phenomena that's really weird. So that's what's been rattling around my brain. That's about it.
What do you think? What's your initial impression on why
Well,
do you think the plant's praying, and what is some of the stuff that you're hearing, and what do you think sticks?
I say it's that they definitely well watered at that point. So that's one thing that at least I've noticed most of the time with mine. And
Well
I
watered
would
meaning
say
like recently watered, like the water has
the
been
night
done
before it
properly.
could have been no, the night before they could have been watered. Especially like if you're doing yeah,
A
in my
recency of
like
watering.
organic kind, yeah, like if I only water every 3 days or whatever, if they were ever praying really heavy, it would be after a good watering with some and sometimes with something added. But some people claim it's an indication that it's too much light and they're trying to avoid there's so many people that have different explanations for it. I'm really wondering what the reality is. But
I'd say
I
the
think
reality is
they're
in
happy when
different
they're praying for
circumstances,
some
it
reason.
happens for different reasons, like what you
That
just
could be
mentioned.
true too. That would be a real curveball. Yeah.
So no, I just know this I would put my reputation on this one
Money
that
on it. All right. There you go.
where if and when
Now we're
science comes
talking.
around on this, they're going to find that a plant will pray if it's given too much light as a light response, a photo protective response. But they'll also find unrelated to light levels with a constant light level, like you're mentioning in organics.
Yeah.
If you fed like you watered after not watering for 3 days, and now you just watered in um, recharge or something, right? It's got a whole cocktail of goodies for that plant that might even have awakened things that are in the soil that weren't previously available because you've got good microbes, you've got aminos and things like that. There's a whole sort of array of goodies that can help the plant thrive or succeed in a different way. And I think the angle, like you see the plant behind me, or this is like a random Jack in the Beanstalk type thing, but the cannabis leaf in my logo here, they're kind of angled up almost at like an upward 45 versus like a flat 0. And if they were at like a 90, where they're like almost touching each other in the middle, I think that's too high. I think it'd be a stress response. If they're at a upward 45, like you see to either side of my head if you're watching, I think that's within a healthy range. It depends on the plants and cultivation environment, but I've certainly seen it as a response to too much light. People deliberately, like when I work with a lot of different growers at this point, I'll ask them, have you changed anything after they send me questions? So, like my plant is struggling or looks good or bad, or how are things going? And a lot of the times it'll be, oh, I just transplanted from my veg room to my flower room and the light is a 600 watt versus a 100 watt or a T5. And that's when the plant's like doing that, like, oh my God, like I'm getting hit with too much light response. But like what you're saying, I think is more of just a maybe sort of healthy sign. And I don't know if it's a genetic thing, what causes some to do it more than others, because some go like from that flat 0 down to like a negative 45 and then back up, down 45 and then back up. And they might get to like a plus, I don't know, 15 degree or something like that, but they're never really doing like this really, or like literal praying hands emoji where they're touching in the
Yeah,
middle.
I've never seen them touch it, but I've seen them almost at a 90 degrees straight up and down, and that's and yeah, there's
It
one
does seem to
that's
happen
hard.
sometimes when they're growing really fast, which is like it doesn't seem like a stress when they're growing 3 inches a day and they're like literally just like charging
And
towards the
yeah,
light,
yeah, they're really healthy plants too.
like
So that's why
vigorous
I
as
think,
fuck, like
yeah,
literally growing at the light with like insane intensity. So the leaves are just like, I want to get as close to that thing as
yeah,
possible, maybe.
stretching up maybe. But and I also have that one plant when I watered it. If I water it heavy, it would like droop, and then it'll come right back, in like 20 minutes, whatever. But when you first water it, it looked like it was sick or something, and then it would like perk back up quickly. But yeah, definitely a genetic thing. Yeah,
I've had something like that too. Like my Blue Dream Cross. It was a blueberry super silver haze. It was like a knockoff Blue Dream, but still it was pretty fire. And it had some really kind of fat, ripply leaves, and it almost seemed like it stored more water in the leaf than a lot of typical leaves that are like really just perfectly flat. It had almost like a swelled, almost like bulbous look to the leaf, like a rippled effect. But on top of that, it was just like if you took calipers to the leaf, it was probably like, I don't know, 10 millimeters versus a normal leaf might be like, I don't know, 2, 3 or something like that. But yeah, that was interesting. It could be what I was growing under, the lighting, or maybe stress because it was one of the first grows in the space or something like that. But I did find that very interesting, and I'd also seen that outside of my own grow, which made me more tend to believe that. Have you ever noticed anything like that with blueberry tile with like a kind of a different looking leaf? Or you've got blueberry
I,
cheesequake and stuff. Do you have any like kind of ripples in the
not to
crosses?
get out of the ordinary, really, that I've noticed. Yeah.
I think I
The
actually have
one,
some examples of the leaf. I can go find it on my Instagram here. We've got like 8 minutes left, so
yeah,
you
the one
can
I was referring to is my time right plant. When I water that, it like droops for 20 minutes or so, and then it perks up totally, you know?
that is interesting. And I tend to find that that doesn't stress me out or worry me very much. Some people get really bummed out when they see it droop at all, but if it bounces back within a 12 to 24-hour period, I tend to think that it's not the end of the world, so to speak. So I'm
Yeah,
going
when it
to
first happened, though, yeah, I thought it was, I didn't know what was happening. And then after time, I realized what was happening.
I actually found a leaf because I did a little saved story on my Instagram with I called one my haze pheno and one the blueberry pheno. And you'll see here in just a few seconds. Can you see my screen where it says V haze pheno on the top? How? Anybody? You see that what I'm seeing? Or has it not come through yet?
Yep.
Okay, so if you look at Nemo, which I kind of labeled the blueberry pheno, this is kind of what I was talking about. It's not like crazy, like that much different, but like compare it especially to the one that's right next to it, you can see just like my cursor is right on this center leaf lit right here. You can see how thin not only like the width is, but if I would have turned it to the side more, you can see that this plant just has more of like a three-dimensional nature. Like it's literally coming up. Its ridges are more ruffled, so to speak. And I just found that interesting between this plant for sure. Wonder if I have another thing about
Yeah,
I
I
think
no,
that's
wonder
this
why
about
one.
they
that.
called it,
I wonder about that dimpling kind of.
yeah, the alien rift. I think they call it that because it had that rift in the leaf, like, perhaps.
No, I think you're right. I do
Yeah.
remember people describing certain features like that. And there's even stuff like, Super Freak and the Freak Show and much, much, much more mutated. Even in the Velvet Punch F2s, 1 and 16 had what I call the sawtooth pheno, where it had like the really jagged, like double, for every serration, there was actually like two cuts out.
Yeah, I think I had one like that. Yep.
It's wild, man. I just
Both
love that
ways.
look.
Yeah, somebody in the chat was saying that it might be like an edema, which is possible. But like, even that, like whether a plant like creates dimples and folds and things is still, I think, partly I mean, it's a physiological thing. And genes can influence that. Pathogens can influence that too. But like that's kind of like where I feel
Better
like
0911 interestingly says, I see it during aggressive feeding schedule. And at the time, I was running heavy 16 for my first time. And I was probably running a little bit too close to their actual feeding schedule, even though my body said like cut it in half. I ended up getting down to like maybe a quarter or a third of the recommended to get it into the range where the plants were happier. So I was probably, again, no ppm meter, no EC meter, just kind of going blind, growing blind, which I don't
possible, yeah.
recommend. It is very possible and likely, actually, in this case, just knowing what I was cultivating in cocoa in small-ish pots. Up until the final, when they got into 3 gallons, they were more root space. But yeah, those things went crazy, man. But I did notice it even like throughout the cycle when things seemingly got more dialed in later on. So I think it was partially genetic and partially cultivation, like a lot of things, right? Uh, Nature and nurture plays a role in the plants and even ourselves. But it's interesting to see how much we can dictate, even lighting style and things like that. I was under way too much of a ceramic metal halide at that time. Like I was given 315 watts when I should have been given 150. I literally was like doubling the light output to my space just because I got a good deal on the light. And I was like not cognizant at the time of exactly how much fucking light that thing could put out. It fit in my space. So I was like, oh, hey, it fits, it works, right? It's lighting things up. But I hadn't considered that too much is too much at that point because this was, at least, I don't know, however many years ago, 20, I don't know, in the 2010 range, not in the 2020s. So it's been a long time and I've learned a lot since then. And light meters have come a long way. Even cell phones have good means of, if you don't have a light meter, you can put this little thing underneath your grow light and end up seeing, roughly where you're at. I know it's not perfect, and all the light meter salesmen will say, "Oh, it's not even close." But my grow, who has tested them side by side with the most expensive meters, has shown like on a graph them in some cases literally chart 1 to 1. So I think that's about as good as I'll ever need. And for a cheap home grow, I'll always advocate people save their money on stuff like that. I know it's enticing to get one of those meters and have exact readings, but it's about functional, effect. Does it really matter to have that 250, 350, $400 meter when your cell phone that you have right now, even your old last cell phone that you probably could throw out and recycle, will still be effective with just its little front facing camera and a good algorithm and sensor. So that's at least my 2 cents on that. I know Dr. MJ would probably disagree, but that being said, we've got a couple minutes left here, and I'll pass it over to Matthew Gates first for any final thoughts and shout outs before we get rolling.
Yeah, I think that the research that we looked at was really interesting. And again, I just want to echo that I'm excited for all cannabis cultivation in other parts of the world. But I'm also excited for like livestock feed and hemp seed and that kind of stuff for commercial and also for private use. And also, I'm excited that we're looking at more research about where cannabis is growing, where we can get those feral genetics, and how we can communally take the best from all these different parts of the world and make something really amazing with them. So that's always really cool. And you can check me out for more pest management information at my YouTube channel, Zenthal. For professional inquiries, check me out on my website, zenthal.com. And yeah, stay tuned for the book that I'm writing if you thought that what I was talking about was interesting.
Definitely good stuff. And support the Patreon and go to the Festapaloozas if they're coming your direction or anywhere close. Get great information in the cool community over there. I talked about George Washington a lot and talked about peanuts a lot, but I didn't mention George Washington Carver. Also, interesting peanut guy, worth looking into if you're interested in just history and growing and agriculture and the history in the U.S. Both those guys were influential in their own ways. But with that said, our last and certainly not least panelist of this evening is the American one.
Hello, Jack. Thank you again for hosting. You always do a great job. And it was great to be here today. And shout out to everyone in chat. I'm the American one. You guys know where to find me. Yeah, and shout out to everyone in the community that's hooked me up recently. I appreciate it. And yeah, I guess that's about it, man. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll catch you around town or on the next one.
Always a pleasure having you, the American one. I love the name. I do. I think that it's like some people get mad at people for being patriotic anymore, but I do as many problems as any country has. I love living in America. We have our issues like anywhere else, but I love it
Yeah,
here.
I adopted that name so long ago. It was before Patriot was a quote bad term. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Before the
Yeah,
American flag got
yeah.
politicized,
It got uh,
pushed to one
associated with
party.
white privilege and yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
The people
Well,
are crazy. We should be proud of our country, even
I'm
though it's
just,
not perfect.
yeah, we
At least some
try.
of us try.
We
Yeah,
strive for good. And I think that our history has a lot of positive as much as it does have some negatives, and you can choose to focus on one or the other. One thing I will say is definitely advocating eating cannabis seed. If you can make your own, shout out to Chef OMJ. He brought up the point that I mentioned many years ago, that some plants might reach their full potential when they are pollinated. If you've never taken a female plant and a male plant and allowed them to pollinate each other and get all the way to fruition, I think some of the best aromas and frost levels and things like that. Everyone says when you pollinate a plant, it doesn't produce resin. I've had the opposite experience. Some of them have produced the most resin and produced great bud. Granted, you have to pick a bunch of seeds out, but then you can either eat them, grow them, give them to your friends, and then you have your own fun crosses to experiment with. And even if you don't want to make your own seeds, buying a little bag of organic hemp seed from your local farmer, if there's any around, or even just finding whatever organic source of hemp that you can, eat the seeds, even more than I'll advocate for eating peanuts or any other nut. I'll advocate for eating hemp or cannabis seed because it has great values and potential things that aren't even in the other nuts that I was listening earlier. So shout out to cannabis for being so amazing and us for being able to get to talk about it for a few hours every week. You can find me at Jack Greenstock on Instagram, where I'm almost never, unless you just want to DM me over there anymore, because they shut down a lot of cannabis stuff, unfortunately. So my actual account for the most part is Jack underscore Greenstock on X, formerly called Twitter. That's my backup account on Instagram in case I get deleted. You can find me on 50strains.com, or you can get my book, 50 Strains of Green, or seeds and things. Everything's 24% off this year for 2024. Shout out to everybody who supports both listening to the show and supporting us, whether it's a service or Patreon or a product, or even just a thankful DM, somebody in the chat, like shouting out Spartan Grown, saying thanks for being here. He does a lot of shows. He doesn't have to be here. So we appreciate him being here. I'm sure it feels good for him to get positive feedback. I'm sure he's not reading all the comments all the time, but it's always good to, get some positive feedback. I think it's good to be critical of us as well. If you think that we're not doing a good job, call us out, keep us sharp, make us better. We're all growing together. That's what it's all about. And peace and love, unity. That's what I believe in. That's my party. Green and purple party, I guess, the cannabis folk. That's who I get along with and love, and will always support. And I think that we're a group that can promote unity in a world where there's not a lot of it all the time. So keep on being that loving, peaceful, happy, positive person as much as you can be, even when the world doesn't necessarily act that way. So with all that said, peace and love. Jack Greenstock signing out. Keep on growing, and we'll see you all next week.